We're at eHealth 2012, and I'm here with Sebastiaan Foppema, who is Dutch from origin, but now lives for so long in the States that we're going to do it in English. You work for PatientsLikeMe, very well known among professionals in Holland who deal with eHealth, but not very well known among the general public. What is it for? What is the platform? What does it do?
Sure. It's an online community of patients, a place where patients can go and get connected with patients, other patients like them. These are typically patients with chronic illnesses, and after being diagnosed with whatever they may have, one of the first thoughts and feelings they have is, gee, I feel alone, I need to learn more about this condition. Most importantly, I wish I could talk to someone that has this before, and is a little bit further ahead than I am. And so that's what we are. We are a platform that brings together today 160,000 patients across roughly 1,600 medical conditions, and obviously these numbers continuously change and grow.
Okay, and is that a large share of the patients that are out there in the US?
Not nearly as large as we'd like it to be, obviously. We have great plans to grow substantially in the next 3 to 5 years. But we found that it's not just a number of patients out there that we serve, it's really a number of patients within certain conditions that we serve. The type of platform that we are is particularly relevant to people with chronic illnesses, people that aren't 100% happy with the care that they get from their caregivers, their doctors, their providers. And so they are looking for extra information, they're looking to learn from other patients. And that isn't necessarily true for every condition out there. And so we are more relevant and more successful within specific subsets of conditions out there.
And what do you see are the effects of the platform, of the use of it? And because you talked about patients are able to share and they're looking for other people to talk to.
Sure.
But what do you see in terms of medical effects of being a member of a platform?
Sure. So first, a disclaimer: all the information is reported by patients, which tends to be a barrier in some ways, and depending on who you talk about. So professional caregivers sometimes doubt the information is accurate or complete, and yet that doesn't mean that you should completely ignore it. But that said, and I hope you'll come to the presentation a little bit later, there's a few slides on and basically the outcome and what patients are feeling and finding and what they're saying to us. There's a whole bunch of stats. We're big in measurement and research and bringing data and statistics to the table. One particular stat that stands to mind is we did some research with a large partner of ours, a pharmaceutical company, around their, some of their epilepsy endeavors and drugs, and we spoke to many epilepsy patients on our site. And 23% of them claimed that just by being on our site and learning about their condition and talking to others, they have reduced their ER visits to the emergency room by 23%, which obviously is very important to the patient. You really don't ever want to go to the emergency room, at least not in the States, because it's a terrible place to be. And from a cost standpoint for the health system overall, this is where most of the money gets spent.
Yeah, so it might be a cost reduction way. Do you see a lot of support from the pharmaceutical industry?
Indeed, yes. Pharmaceutical industries are more and more realizing that they are not necessarily just in the business of producing drugs, which is probably the way that they saw themselves a few years ago, and they've come to the realization that they need to measure and prove that their interventions, i.e. their drugs, are actually working, because they are preparing themselves for a future where healthcare is paid for and rewarded based on outcomes and results, as opposed to based on the number of patients I saw, the number of drugs I sold or prescribed. And so they are more and more realizing that they need to listen and learn from the patients beyond the clinical trials that they obviously conduct, bringing drugs to market.
What is happening in the participation of clinics in your platform? Do they start their own sort of services, or do they connect or participate in independent platforms like yours?
So we have a lot of, we call them providers, right, caregivers. We have a relatively large number of providers on our site. They can register as a doctor and get access to other patients online, just like patients can get connected with other patients. We're getting a lot of interest in people saying, this is wonderful, but I wish I could see my list of patients that come to me and that are part of my practice. We're working on some of that functionality. Now there's certainly, you know, some organizations large enough to go at it alone, and then there is, you know, smaller clinics and practices that are very interested in working with us, since we already have it, the lion's share of sometimes their patients.
Yeah. And what is the current response of the medical profession in the US, you know, on the platform?
Sure.
Probably, you know, go both ways, probably.
Absolutely. So there's skepticism from the standpoint of, well, this is patient-reported outcomes, to which we respond, well, you know, take a particular patient that you have. You're probably going to see this patient, you know, if they're chronically ill, maybe once a month, you know, maybe twice a month if it's a bad case. What happens in between those visits with your patient? You know, typically the patient comes in, one of the first questions the doctor may ask is, how have you been since last visit? And you know, they may spend a minute or so talking about that, and the patient may say, well, you know, I've been okay, or you know, I had a rough patch, but there isn't a whole lot of information to back that up. What we are able to provide is information that the doctor doesn't currently have, which is what happens between the last visit and this visit. And information that could be distilled, reviewed prior to the patient coming into the room, so that the doctor can say, hey, I looked at your PatientsLikeMe profile and it looked like you had some type of episode 3 days ago. Was that just misinformation? Did you know, make a mistake typing this data in, or what happened? Explain this to me. So that conversation can be a lot more specific, which can actually be very helpful to providers. At the same time, of course, certainly in the States, we still live in a world where patients get paid, or providers get paid based on the number of patients they see. So every extra question they ask of a patient is time equals money. So it needs to be relevant, it needs to be helpful. And you know, as the payment system, the U.S. healthcare system is now transforming, you know, we expect that more and more providers will jump on this bandwagon.
Do you think your platform helps with the, you know, ever-increasing cost of healthcare, etc.?
Oh, absolutely. Well, my point earlier about the ER visits is just one of many, many examples I could give you. We believe that engaged, educated patients are very key in better outcomes and better care, and those lead to reduced cost. And so we believe that the patient's just been largely missing from this equation. There hasn't been a feedback loop from the patient back to the industry. You know, payers, providers, pharmaceuticals, companies, governments just haven't had a good way to learn from patients in the real world. Are you actually taking those drugs? When are you taking them? At night, in the morning, before or after dinner? Are you actually complying with the treatment plan your provider gave you? How are you feeling about that? If you're not taking your drugs, why not? Is it because it's, you know, needles that you need to stick in your arm, or is there some other reason? And I think that that is just extremely helpful information that's been missing, and I don't see a way, patients like me or other companies, I don't see a way for us to overcome the cost hurdle without including the patient in a proper way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.